oracles, decentralized applications, decentralized autonomous organizations are also appearing at an ever-increasing rate. Now, one stance of lawyers could of course be to say, that is all IT geek stuff for which I could not care less. I'm not sure whether this would be the wisest approach. I'm rather convinced that it is in all our best interests to master these concepts as quickly as possible. These technologies might well revolutionize our world in the near future, our world as citizens, our world as lawyers, and our world as arbitration practitioners. The main problem today is that IT specialists and lawyers struggle to understand each other. They do not even share a common language. When lawyers hear a catchphrase like "code is law," they understand that IT specialists dream of a world without legal rules. On the other hand, when IT specialists hear about concepts like requirement as to form, or expression of intent, or objective interpretation of a manifestation of will, they get the impression that our main job is to impede any progress. They perceive lawyers as being unnecessarily cautious and complicated, which on average might not be so far away from the truth. This is why ASA decided, as an arbitration think tank, to put the topic of blockchain and smart contracts on its agenda. So let us have a quick look at the structure of today's conference. Mr. Meisser will first explain the technical foundations and the economic context of blockchain. A blockchain is not a prerequisite for a smart contract, but blockchain allows smart contracts to exploit their full potential. And this is why we will start with an explanation on how blockchain functions and what this new technology enables to do. Mrs. Ecken will then explain the legal implications of smart contracts. What does it mean for a legal system when a contract is able to execute itself without the intervention of any human being? Are our good old codes of obligations sufficiently equipped to deal with this challenge, or should legislative measure be taken? After the coffee break, Mr. Kreis will introduce us to the interplay between blockchain and dispute resolution. One of the main advantages of blockchain-based smart contracts is to dispense with costly and time-consuming intermediaries in whom we have to place trust. Now, smart contractors dream of a world without intermediaries, without wholesalers, without bankers, and without insurers, but also a world without lawyers, without public notaries, judges, and arbitrators. So the question is, how can arbitration fit into blockchain-based smart contracts? Will arbitration be able to have a piece of the future blockchain cake? And to close the conference, Mr. Bock and Mr. Bayer will present current projects which are already attempting to integrate dispute resolution mechanisms, and in particular arbitration, into blockchain. The slides you will see, the PowerPoint presentations, you have them also online. You have received an email from Alex a few days ago. You can see the presentations there. So let's immediately turn to our first speaker, Mr. Luzius Meisser. Mr. Meisser holds a master's degree in computer science from the ETH Zurich and a master's degree in economics, also from the University of Zurich. He has previously founded a cloud storage startup and has invested in a few select Swiss startups as well. He is a board member of Bitcoin Swiss, Quit.ch, Algo Trader, Meisser Economics, and Bitcoin Association Switzerland. He's also a student still at the Institute for Banking and Finance, also at the University of Zurich. Mr. Meisser, thank you very much for being here, and you have the floor.
So, many thanks for the kind introduction. A quick question, do I get this remote control to flip the slides? Is this somewhere here? Ah, here it is. Okay, good. So, nice to be here. So, I have more slides than minutes, so fasten your seat belts. I will go forward quite quickly, but I will also jump over a few topics that will later be deepened by other speakers. So, this is about first setting the stage. So, where are we? What's the economic background of all of this? What's the situation in Switzerland? What is Bitcoin? This was the first use case for the blockchain, and with Bitcoin, the blockchain came to life, so it's important to know about it. Then Ethereum, this is the most important platform for smart contracts. Then what kind of arbitration opportunities are there? And then hopefully we have still a few minutes for one or two questions. What I put here is a picture I like particularly. So this is how Bitcoiners often feel. They think of themselves as brave Spartans fighting against the Leviathan of the existing financial system. So this is the crypto valley. There's countless startups, most of which have a bank account in Liechtenstein because Swiss banks are reluctant to give them the bank accounts because their compliance departments are scared. But they still exist, and here's one of the news articles that Mr. Müller mentioned. This one is written by me, but generally, so the sentiment is this is a big opportunity for finance in Switzerland. And we need such an opportunity. So at the moment, to go a little bit more details, you can categorize all the players like this. So in the middle I put the exchanges, because those are the ones that connect everything. And the biggest exchanges today, like Bitfinex, they make much more revenue and profits than traditional stock exchanges like the Swiss exchange. So there would be it would be very interesting for Switzerland to have them here. I put here Bitcoin Swiss, which is the biggest Bitcoin broker in Switzerland. So the exchanges, that's where you trade all the Bitcoins and tokens. They are created by the miners who provide the infrastructure. Some of them are also hugely profitable. Then there's lots of people who just believe in this and buy to hold. That's long-term speculation. These are people who think the financial system will collapse and in the end only Bitcoin will survive. And then they will all have all the purchasing power. So that's the ideological extreme. Then there's lots of traders because it goes up and down a lot, these exchange rates. There's lots of trading opportunities which attracts traders who like to trade on volatile things. And this is related to gambling, which is also a big field, and merchants that actually accept these cryptocurrencies for service or whatever they deliver. And a few users that use it. Then, and this is maybe the most interesting thing going on right now, it's 1000 bits. So that's data, and data is objective. Everyone can look at the string and come to the conclusion it's 1000 bits long. And opposed to that is information. Information is subjective, while data is objective. Information is how much you learn by receiving a data package. So if you give you a newspaper you haven't seen yet, it contains a lot of information to you. If I give you the same newspaper again, you don't learn much more, so the second time it contains much less information. That's the information theory view. So in information theory, information is how much you learn by receiving some data, and data is how long data objectively is. And both is measured in bits. And now we come back to Bitcoin. There's nothing in the Bitcoin system that associates a particular Bitcoin with a piece of information. You cannot say this string of zeros and ones is one Bitcoin. All you find in the Bitcoin system is balances, like in a bank account. You can say this address is associated with 17.3 Bitcoins. So Of course, the 17.3 is a piece of data, but you cannot copy it and then and duplicate it by that. This is also a characteristic of data. If you copy data, you have it twice. You cannot copy a Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is not data. And so I hope I made that clear. So if you want to read more about the properties of Bitcoin, how to classify it legally, you can look at that paper, for example, where I'm the co-author. You can also download the paper. In the end of the presentation, I provide a download link. So whenever I write a paper somewhere for a journal, I say I also want to have the right to publish it somewhere or to write it to others, because I think academic knowledge should be openly accessible to anyone. So now it's to you. So now we start getting a little deeper into the technology. So how does the blockchain work? And this, I want to start with an analogy, because this analogy works very, very well in many cases. You can say Bitcoin is like the stone money of Yap, but without the stones. So, I once had someone in the audience who grew up on this island Yap. It has maybe 3,000 inhabitants or so that's quite an accident. He could confirm this stone money exists. So today they have more modern forms of money, but old stone money works like this. So they have big stones, and these stones represent value. So maybe I buy a goat from you, and I pay with a stone. The problem is these stones are so heavy I cannot carry them around easily. So the solution to that is we don't actually move the stone. We just tell everyone that now the stone belongs to Arthur, for example. And this, because the island is small enough, this knowledge spreads, and in the end, everyone knows, or at least the village elder knows, which stone belongs to whom. And that way they have a very elegant payment system. And now you have to ask yourself, if the stones are never moved, do we need them? And the answer is no. And now we get Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is like that. We create some abstract value, a Bitcoin, and then whenever we move it, we tell everyone. And that's how the Bitcoin system works. So if I create a Bitcoin transaction, and here is an example. So let's go through what happens when I send some Bitcoin. So to create a transaction, I need a destination. So I scan this address. This is an address of Sci-Hub. Sci-Hub is a project which makes openly available all academic literature with disregard of all copyright laws. So of course they cannot accept credit cards, because that would get shut down immediately, but they can accept Bitcoins. So, and I think this is a very, very good project, and if you like academic research, it's a good institution to donate some money to. So I've scanned this, and I say I want to send 0.001 Bitcoin, which is about 5 Swiss francs. I say confirm, and now what happens? I have to enter my PIN. So now what happens? So this transaction is being sent to the Bitcoin network. So I've signed this transaction with my private key. So my cell phone also has a private key stored, similar to the one in the bank now. And this creates an unforgeable transaction. So if you get this transaction, you can be absolutely sure that this must come from the one who owned that Bitcoin. They don't know the name that's attached to it, they don't know me, but they know it must come from the one who owns that Bitcoin. It's like when you pay with cash at the train station. The person on the other side of the counter doesn't know who you are, but they know that you are the one owning this money that you pass over. And that's the same here. So you can prove that you are that one, and you send this transaction to the network. And the network makes sure that everyone knows about it. So everyone knows now that I own 0.001 Bitcoins less, and the woman who operates Sci-Hub owns 0.001 Bitcoins more. And that's how the system works from a technology point. So that's how a transaction works and what happens. And because the network is completely distributed, the network that forwards out, this is like gossip on the island of Yap. You cannot take a single citizen of Yap and say, block this transaction. Then the gossip just spreads through other citizens. So you cannot really stop these payments, because there are tens of thousands of computers that spread the knowledge about this transaction having happened. And this also from a legal point of view, what are these nodes that spread the transaction? They are not financial intermediaries, they are more like witnesses to the transaction. So they witness what happens and they tell everyone else what they have seen. And the role of private keys is a very interesting one to look at. So in the legal literature you sometimes see that read that the Bitcoin belongs to whoever has the private key. But sometimes you get problems where you see that this cuts it a little short. So you need to have a more elaborate approach. And this is something I outline in this paper, Verfügungsmacht und Verfügungsrecht an Bitcoins im Konkurs, which is also available for download with the link at the end of the presentation. So, and here I bring the example of the Tezos Foundation. So Tezos is a big project. They've raised more than 200 million in cryptocurrencies. And to secure these funds, they created a special address that's secured with 2 keys. So that's why I put this box. And if you have very good eyes, you see it has 2 keyholes. So you need 2 keys to open the box. And this is for security. And 1 key they gave to Bitcoin Swiss, and 1 key they kept for themselves. So this is for security. So that means that the president of Tezos cannot run away with all the money, because all the transactions need also to be signed by Bitcoin Swiss. And now if you legally say whoever owns the key also owns the money, you get a problem here, because now you have 2 people, you have shared ownership basically, but this doesn't really cut it, because it's clear the funds belong to Tezos. So, and the legal solution to that is to say we distinguish basically between possession and ownership. Of course you cannot do that, because possession and ownership are terms that are reserved for physical things. So, but what we can do, we can distinguish between the power to dispose and the right to dispose. And we say the power to dispose, so the power to move these coins is with the keys and it is shared. But the right to dispose, the right to decide what happens to these Bitcoins, and the right to basically the ownership or who belongs this thing to is Tezos. And that way you can resolve this legal puzzle. So if you are interested in that, you should read our paper. So that brings me now to a fuller picture of how a blockchain works. So you basically need 3 ingredients. You need private and public keys. So this allows you to create transactions that you cannot forge, that cannot be manipulated. And then you need a system to collect all these transactions, and that's the blockchain. And a very important characteristic of that system is that you must be sure that it is complete. So you cannot also remove transactions after they happened, or you cannot change the order of transactions. And to ensure that, you need some kind of what computer scientists call consensus mechanism. So you need a way for everyone to agree in what order the transactions happen. And this is where we need, so how do we create consensus among people where no one is the dictator and no one can decide? So you need some kind of democracy. And that's what the Bitcoin system also does. It basically has a democracy where the system participants vote what transactions actually happened and in which order they happened. And the problem is, in the internet you can pretend to be 1,000 people or 1,000 computers. So how do we count the votes? And the solution of the Bitcoin system is to count the votes according to computing power, because you cannot pretend to have more computing power than you have. Like, you cannot pretend to be smarter than you are. And maybe sometimes. But in the long run that doesn't work. So, and that's why, so it's basically a democracy with voting weight proportional to computing power. And because computing power is expensive, there needs to be a reward for contributing that computing power. And that's the block reward. And so the newly created Bitcoins are distributed among these miners. And this has created an arms race. So it started with small hobbyist installations like this. I had one like this myself at home in 2012 or so, but it quickly escalated. And today it looks like this. So, and the estimation is that the Bitcoin network uses about the same amount of energy as a small country. So this is multiple atomic power plants whose energy is completely wasted, because these computing cycles, they don't do anything productive. They're just there to prove that they have the computing power. And then you have the according vote and weights. And so this is, of course, it's bad to have this waste of energy, but there are technological solutions to get around this. And one thing that, for example, the Ethereum system is moving to is so-called proof of stake. So this is called proof of work, because the computer has to do work. And the new technology is called proof of stake, where you have voting weights according to how rich you are. So one coin, one vote, because this is also something you cannot pretend to have. And this is maybe less social, but much greener. So so this is just a technological progress, and I hope this will arrive quite soon. And so this is basically how the blockchain works. You have three ingredients: private key and public keys. Then you have the data structure, the blockchain itself, that collects all the transactions signed with these keys, and then you have some kind of consensus mechanism to make sure everyone has exactly the same chain and agrees on one chain. And in the meanwhile, we have now the whole zoo of different cryptocurrencies, and the second most important one besides Bitcoin is Ethereum, which serves as a platform for smart contracts. So I put up some vocabulary here. I'll skip that for now, because I think the most important one, the smart contract, you will see again with Miriam-Ecken. This is basically just a small, it's not so smart, it's also not really a contract, it's just a small program that's unstoppable, that gets executed on the blockchain. So one example of such a smart contract could be roulette. So this is spelled like this because it's in the Ethereum system. And what this smart contract does, it's just a program describing how roulette works. And this has been deployed to Ethereum system. And now anyone who has access to the system can interact with this contract, like with the vending machine. That's why I put up a vending machine here. And the interaction you can do here is you can call a function called bet on number. So anyone in the world can bet on a number. And of course the Swiss Glücksspielgesetz is not very useful here, because you can connect to anywhere in the world and play in this casino. You can also provide the bank with funds. So this smart contract has a function where you can give the bank funds, and then you participate in the profits. So this lives on even if the programmer who has originally created it dies. And so generally what happens when you create a smart contract is you think about what you want to do, you create this little program, then you send it to the network, and then it lives there basically forever. It's like a satellite you send to space. It is there and does what it's programmed to do. And yes. And the biggest example, in my opinion, so what's the most important use case for this? Generally, smart contracts have a very big limitation. They can only refer to things that exist within the system. So they are very bad at interacting with physical things. They are good at modeling something self-contained, like roulette or like gambling. This is something that you don't need an outside connection. And that's also why smart contracts are very good for financial services, because often financial services are also detached from the physical reality. For example, a stock, a share in a company is something very abstract. And this is my favorite use case, it's shares on the blockchain. So if you put stocks on the blockchain, they become immediately transferable worldwide. And so you can counter this trend a little, which I showed you in the beginning, of the declining number of stocks, which is, by the way, a problem for your pension fund, because the fewer stocks there are that are publicly tradable, the smaller is the investment universe of your pension fund, and the lower is your return. So all the regulation that protects us from the risk is also protecting us from the return. And so I want to change that a little by providing new ways to bring securities on, make them tradable worldwide. And there are also on the blockchain new methods to make them liquid. There can be smart contracts that act as traders and as market makers. And what you can do then, if you do that right, you can unlock the so-called liquidity premium. The liquidity premium is how much a stock gains in value when it's publicly traded, and you can always buy and sell it. And this is about 25%. So what we have here, we have the key in our hands to make all the firms in the world 25% more valuable. And this is an enormous potential. And if we can create the right legal setup in Switzerland for unlocking that potential, and if all the firms in the world come to us to unlock, to make themselves tradable on the blockchain, and we just charge 1% of what they gain, then we have a huge banking business again. So this is just one way that the blockchain could bring back the good times for finance in Switzerland. And what's also interesting here, you have some function for, so one, what happens if someone loses a token? So if you lose the private key, you lose access to the token, you lose access to the share that's associated with that token. And in the real world, when you lose a physical share certificate, you can go to a judge, and the judge declares that certificate invalid, and the company prints a new certificate. But what can you do in the digital world? It's not specified yet. And here, this could be an arbitration opportunity. Maybe you say the smart contract that manages the shares has a backdoor, and the key to that backdoor we give to an arbitration organization. And whenever there's some shares went missing, shareholders can present their case there, and then they can use their backdoor to reassign the ownership of the lost shares. So this is one way where you need some neutral external decision makers that judges about the situation. And I'm sure many more of them will arise in the future. It's not yet so clear which ones they are. And so this is about the shares on the blockchain and the arbitration opportunity. This example will later be presented by the enemy guys. And here is my last slide. So this is just to present a very bold vision. So this is one of the basically the boldest project that's related to arbitration on the blockchain. It's called BitNation. And what do they want to do? So in their own words, they say you can create your own decentralized, borderless, voluntary nation. Choose your own code of law and decision-making mechanism, write the constitution, and provide governance services to citizens. So this is a very bold vision. I'm not sure if any of this ever comes true, but you see that the blockchain unlocks a lot of fantasies and visions, and some of them are very interesting, at least to think about. And I think even if this vision doesn't come true, we'll move a little in that direction of people choosing their own laws because they're not directly bound to a specific country. Good. So if you are interested in Bitcoin events, so we have maybe once a month there's a talk organized by the Bitcoin Association. You can also contact me, and here are the links to the papers I've mentioned. Thank you. So now you have to decide about the questions, whether you want to move on or...
Any questions?
Thank you very much. It was very interesting, and it was very interesting presentation. I mean, the only thing I always ask myself normally is how can the whole thing be? You basically said that the Bitcoin can be used to circumvent every law there is, and what came to my mind is it's a perfect system if you want to trade something illegal like drugs, for example.
So I said there's the laws that are attached to financial intermediaries which do not apply here. And of course, Bitcoin is also being abused by, for example, trade drugs, because every powerful technology is used by everyone. And the decision you have to take here is, do we outlaw it and then only the criminals will use it? Or do we keep it legal and then we can also use it? So, because you cannot, it would be very hard to outlaw Bitcoin completely. It's like outlawing possession of gold. So the Americans did it in the past, where they confiscated all the gold, but you can always bury gold in your garden and no one will discover it. So it's very hard to you cannot, so the genie is out of the bottle, it's here.
Maybe a follow-up on the comment. I mean, in the financial world, everything goes away from cash, actually. and every transaction, I mean, we lawyers know that very well. Every transaction has to be should be followed, and it's very difficult nowadays to bring money out of the country. And of course, all that can be circumvented. But when Bitcoin system like this is basically established to circumvent such rules, I mean, maybe I'm Austrian, I'm not Swiss. Maybe that's a different mindset that I have maybe. But how can the whole system stay legal when it circumvents something which at the moment should be prevented? So
the question is, of course, who should have power? Should it be the government or should it have the citizens? Should it be the citizens? And this is a technology that puts financial power back into the hands of the citizens. And of course, we need to be responsible with that.
I mean, I just want to ask one more comment.
It's a different philosophy, of course. Yes.
The government, at least in a democratic state, I mean, that it is.
So
it is a representation of the power of the citizen.
It should be. Often it is not. Look at what the European Parliament is deciding. Yeah.
Could you expand on the fiscal aspect of the Bitcoin?
The fiscal aspect. So, Bitcoin is taxed like every other asset. So, I declare my Bitcoin holding like my stocks or so. That's.
And the fiscal authorities accept it?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
How could they verify?
Actually, verification is, you can verify it with absolute certainty because I can prove that I own these Bitcoins. And they can see every transaction that whenever I receive Bitcoins, they can see it once they know that this address belongs to me. So, of course, I can still hide an address if I want. But once I have told them this is my Bitcoin address, they know exactly how many Bitcoins I own at every point in time. So the system is very transparent in that regard.
Yes, here. I would have a question. Thank you for your provocative presentation. I have the impression you reduce blockchain to Bitcoin and you reduce blockchain to financial services. Can you say a few words about how blockchain could be useful outside of financial services?
So this was a deliberate reduction because I think the biggest potential is in financial services. And the main problem for applications outside financial services is that you need a connection to the physical world. And this is where you get frictions. For example, I heard someone with the idea we could put all the CO2 certificates on the blockchain and we put sensors in all the factories, and whenever they emit CO2, they automatically get deducted their CO2 balance on the blockchain or something like that. And it would be a very trustworthy system because on the blockchain everything is public and so on. And of course, the system fails because the factory can just put the smoke out through a different window or whatever, and then it's not counted anymore. And in all these systems where you try to connect the physical world with the blockchain, the weak link is always the connection to the physical world. And that's because all these other applications that are not as abstract as finance are very limited. And that's why I believe it is mostly a financial innovation, and that's why I also emphasize this as an opportunity for finance in Switzerland and not for other sectors.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
Yeah, you just said before that together in the context of the taxation that you will have to tax it and they will always know that it's your Bitcoin because it's your address. That's what you said. What if you lose your private key? I mean, you still own it, but you cannot use it anymore.
So, yes, so that's basically like when my house burns down and I had a few physical bond certificates, so then I have a problem. And for Bitcoin, it's not recoverable. Something similar happens when you send Bitcoins to an invalid address, which should not happen because there are checksums, but if you deliberately send it to an invalid address, then they are lost forever. Yeah.
maybe go back to your slide with the players.
Yes, right in the beginning.
I mean, when I see that, I still struggle to understand a part of people offering bitcoins and speculation. Who is doing something useful in that map? So it's speculating with all the speculators.
So, okay, there are different use cases. So one is the financing of startups. And
but is there any crypto startup who has done anything useful yet? Just an example.
yes, Ethereum. They create, yeah, so there are crypto startups. A lot of them are right. So the big ICO hype was 1 year ago. It started 1 year ago. So, and 1 year is somewhat a short time to judge it. So there's lots of projects going on. The most successful one, I would say, is Ethereum, which is a platform, of course, for other such projects. So it's not so satisfying. But one thing I'm currently working on is bringing shares on the blockchain, and I believe this is something that unlocks true value because it makes these securities more liquid and more transparent and more easily tradable.
So the only ones producing something useful are the crypto startups in that. And the lawyers obviously don't.
Yeah, so give it a little time. I agree that for now it hasn't had much of an impact on the real world.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, if you take some of the real world, I don't know, some craftsman produces someone, and then he has the problem how to sell it. And here my impression is everybody sells it, and then they need to think of what he wants to produce, but they have already sold it. So is that impression wrong?
So there are certainly some that exploit the hype, that have a vague idea and they raise millions with and spend most of it on marketing, and then nothing is left. That's why I personally never invest in a single ICO, because at the moment I think it's a hype stage, but I believe in the long-term potential. And regarding Bitcoin, I think the most important application for Bitcoin is as a digital gold. So you can use it as a store of wealth, and you can use it to transfer wealth in jurisdictions that fail otherwise. For example, in Venezuela or in Argentina, there was within 1 generation they saw their money decline in value to 0 3 times. So, and then maybe it's not a bad idea to put some of your money into Bitcoin, like you would buy some gold maybe. So I think Bitcoin is a digital competitor to gold.
I have a question and would like to bring the topic back to arbitration, in fact.
Yeah.
Let's assume you have a smart contract and the arbitrator decides to annul the smart contract. How will he do that? Because you said the blockchain is unchangeable, cannot be modified. How does he do that?
So what you would need to do, you would need to add a special self-destruct function from the beginning and put that into a smart contract and say the only one who can call that function is the arbitrator. Or you can assign a key to that and give this key to whoever you trust. And then, if that's you, then you could at any time invoke that function and destroy the smart contract. But everything that can be done with the smart contract needs to be defined in advance.
Eric Fischer, thank you very much for your presentation. You put the finger on I don't know you put the finger on the key thing from my point of view, which is the loss of the private key. Are you aware of any implementation of the blockchain technology where this issue has been addressed and where the back door has been created to replace the lost private key?
Yes, so in the project I'm working on with the shares on the blockchain, as a company you don't want the shares to get lost, so you need a mechanism to address that. And what we did there, we said there's a function in a smart contract that anyone can call, and this function is called declare lost, and you can say you can declare these shares are lost in my opinion. And when you call this function, you need to put up a collateral, a deposit. So If the shares are worth 1,000 Swiss francs, you put up a collateral in either in the currency of the system, also worth 1,000 Swiss francs. And now two things can happen. Either after, let's say, 2 months, nobody does anything, you get the deposit back and you get also the shares. So you have unlocked these shares from this lost state. But if the rightful owner comes, he can prove that he is still alive and use the private key to not only get his shares back, but also the deposit. And that makes it very risky for someone to just try to claim anyone's shares, but you still have a mechanism to get them back, and you also don't need a centralized authority who can move any shares at any time, which we don't want. That's our solution.
Thank you. Let's perhaps take one more question. We can come back to these issues later.
Since there is always somebody smarter than you, how do you avoid hackers to penetrate your computer system and destroy?
So, the good thing is that if you do it right, you don't need to be very smart to secure your Bitcoin. So what you can do is you can print out the private key on a piece of paper and put that paper somewhere safe in a safe deposit box with the bank, and that cannot be hacked. So if you want to do long-term storage of Bitcoins or crypto assets, this is basically known how to do safely. You can even send additional Bitcoins to that address. Only when you want to use the coins, you need to go online again and enter the key from the paper, and then of course you need to use a secure computer. And so it is a little risky, and if you don't trust yourself to do that, you can use a service provider like Bitcoin Swiss, who will store. They have a subsidiary called Swiss Crypto Vault, which is a secure storage of crypto assets in a mountain bunker.
When you come back later to secure the security.
This is one way if you're very conservative and if you don't trust anything electronic at all. Good. So thank you very much. I hope the notes are in the back now.